Hello everyone! Thanks for clicking on this video. I just wanted to give a really quick warning for the pronunciation in this video. My Spanish is not very good, especially Spanish right from Spain. So I know technically it's pronounced more in the line of Esplendor Geometrico, but that's not how I'll be pronouncing it, and I'll probably butcher a lot of the title tracks in this video, so I do apologize. But with that said, I really hope that you enjoy the video. When you hear the words industrial, what kind of things do you immediately imagine? Perhaps images of sheets of metal, power tools, pipes, hard hats, steam, cranes, and all other kinds of things fill your mind. Now, what kind of sounds do you imagine? Machines working and groaning loudly deep inside factories, gears grinding, the clangs, steam screaming while it's escaping pipes, weird and unknown machines sounding while they do some unknown thing. The sound of everything in the area working together to reach a uniform production goal in an almost weird rhythmic harmony that can be borderline hypnotic, if not meditative. Now, imagine a music project that could capture all these sights and sounds, feelings and thoughts of what industrial is. That is the Spanish industrial band Esplendor Geometrico. The rhythmic noise masters, the meditative machinists. Hailing from Madrid, Spain, Esplendor Geometrico is easily one of the all-time best industrial acts within the genre. Sometimes, when people ask me what are some industrial acts that actually sound like the name of the genre, industrial sounds, they're not necessarily the distorted post-punk or EBM stylings of the groups, and more of the music concrete styling, I will of course point them no further than this amazing group. Now, with that said, I am suggesting a project that has been making music since the 1980s, and now has well over 60 releases by this point. So, you might just feel a bit overwhelmed and are probably wondering, well, where do I start? And thus, I created this video. It is an installment in my Where to Start series, because Esplendor Geometrico is another artist of many that I want to share with others and to help them not feel intimidated about approaching some of these very vast discographies. And they are, of course, one of the absolute best bands in my personal opinion. I think they are an absolute must-listen, whether you already love industrial and electronic music, or you're just maybe dipping your toes in the black, oily pool. In this video, I'm going to suggest 5 albums that I feel help highlight a different aspect in Esplendor's sound. I also want to discuss a little bit about the group and its history without going too much in depth, as well as some of the ideas and processes that go into making these albums. Now, of course, with any of these groups I suggest in this series, you can listen to any album that you like, or just dive right headfirst at any point of your own choosing. I am making this video because in the past few months, I have taken it upon myself to listen to every single release that I could that Esplendor Geometrico has put out. I've exclusively been pretty much listening to only Esplendor and looking for the perfect albums to suggest to everyone based on a few criteria. Some of my criteria includes, I did not want to pick any albums that might have been a bit too harsh or noisy for the average music fan who is not always listening to these genres. Another criteria is its availability. I wanted everyone to be able to easily find these albums, and thankfully every album except one on my list is available right now on Esplendor Geometrico's own page, esplendorgeometrico.bandcamp. The band has always been very independent and very good at keeping their music available in digital and physical formats. They have been putting stuff out on their own labels since the 80s between the labels Discos Esplendor Geometrico and now Geometric, as well as owning a record store right in Madrid, Spain. And even if the albums are not right on their Bandcamp page, there are very easy ways to find them on YouTube and that one mysterious Bluebird. I will provide links to their Bandcamp and labels in the description down below, of course. And the main criteria for the way I chose these albums for the list, after many repeated listens, was really how much I felt each album appropriately encompassed the different sounds that the band provides through all their different albums. Despite being labeled mainly as industrial music, which it certainly is, despite them saying otherwise, The range of the group's music can reach such a wide variety within the spectrum of the genre. Some albums come off as purely rhythmic noise, some are just extremely mechanical factory wastelands, and some can be highly hypnotic, repetitive sound. Some even have more vocals and samples, and some have none. And some albums have influences of sound from other countries. I felt it was important to acknowledge all these different types of albums and showcase the range of the group because I feel certain elements will appeal to certain people of all kinds of music tastes. Maybe someone likes newer production sounds and wants a more modern take. There's an album for that. Sound collages? There are those. Heavy-headed banging, clanging noise in your ears? We got that. New to this entire noise industrial power electronics thing? I think we can give you something awesome. So just who are Esplendor Geometrico, beyond being just an industrial act from Spain? Well, let's start off with a very lovely and interesting name. The name translates to splendid geometry and comes from a futurist text written by F.T. Marinetti. The full translation being the geometric splendor of the world's mechanic. Although, lead member Arturo Lanz has said that even though the name is taken from futurist literature, there is not a deeper meaning behind the name, and he just really enjoys the sound of it. The band has been made up of many members that have come in and out over the years, with the main consistent member being Arturo Lanz, who's considered the main composer of the outfit. The early members mainly consisted of Arturo and Gabriel Riaza, the person to give much of the Middle Eastern and tribal flair that would show up in many of their albums, as a main duo, with other members rotating in and out to contribute other things like music and art. People such as Juan Carlos Sastre, who makes much of the album cover work for the band, and Andres Norby, who is their manager and runs the Geometric label. The more modern act mainly consists of Arturo and Saviero Evangelista, who contributes music in live performances and is in charge of taking Arturo's music and editing, titling, and packaging it for to sell as one of Esplendor's albums. Saviero also has his own project known as MSB, or Most Significant Beat. Esplendor was actually a band formed after a falling out from an original band, that group being a La Movida band, Aviador Dro. La Movida can be very loosely summed up as a countercultural musical movement coming mainly from Madrid that came up after the death of dictator Francisco Franco and the transition from a dictatorship to a democracy. In the official Esplendor documentary called Geometria de l'Esplendor, a quote on this movement says, "The youth were filling the void after 40 years of dictatorship. Youngsters had a new feeling of rebellion." Many bands and art movements were coming together at this time, one of them being an alternative synth-pop band started by school classmates Arturo Lanz and Servando Carballar. They would put out ads in papers like Segunda Mano asking for people to join them that also enjoyed music like the Sex Pistols and Cabaret Voltaire. They would find quite a few other talented musicians, and soon they gained quite a bit of popularity. They would go on stage dressed up as workers with uniforms they had bought specifically from uniform stores, so that, in their own words, looked like some weird, literal, scientific punk. The band would put out quite a few singles and was gaining success, even getting a chance to record a full-length album for a record label. However, some of the members were beginning to feel that this was not the sound they wanted to be making with Aviador Dro. It was too much pop and not enough rhythm and noise. This was especially true for Arturo, who had been shown a throbbing Bristol album at a record store in Switzerland and had become very influenced by their sound. So of course, on the day of the recording studio, ideals and heads clash, and Arturo, Gabriel, Juan Carlos, and Andres would leave to go on to form Esplendor Geometrico. Their first single, Necrosis en la Polla, would net them some controversy, but also showcase the path that they were leading down. No longer a La Movida group, they were coming into their own to become a legendary industrial band. The sound of Esplendor Geometrico is meant to be the rhythm of mechanical sequence. It is made with meditation in mind. In interviews and the documentary, many key phrases seem to pop up very often when members talk about the music. Words such as primitive, tribal, repetitive, hypnotic, mechanical, and of course, meditative. These very much accurately describe their sound, so much so that I can't help myself but use these words very often in this video to describe the music. The process of making an Esplendor album mostly comes from Arturo just coming home and working on music. he would like to enjoy while meditating. He has said that music is only about 10% of his life, while work, family, and hobbies, such as jogging, take up most of it. He also says that he only ever makes music for himself, and that other artists should as well, or else they will be miserable. He says most of the tracks he makes can be over 30 minutes long, and really his only main goal is to make pure rhythms. He says if he can listen to a track and still enjoy it after 20 minutes, then he will finish it or even add samples via using YouTube, as he says he likes finding voices on the website. Then it's sent to Saviero to edit, compile, title, get album work, etc., usually with Arturo having no input or contribution at this point, and not even any knowledge, really.
Sometimes I say, what is the track Presión? No sé. I don't know. Cada día más. Luz de socorro. So, I have no idea. And then, well, it's okay because it's very good for the ego, you know. to down the ego, no?
His sole focus on only creating the music and nothing else has led to an amazing, unique, and passionate sound that is the Esplendor discography. Alright, so let's discuss the awesome albums that I think would be a great spot for any kind of music fan with an interest in this kind of music to start with. Like I said, I have been spending quite a few months with all these albums, listening very closely and mostly a lot while driving in the car or walking every day, trying to check out every single release they have put out, and what a great ride it has been. Never burnt out because all their output is just so good. So, with a reminder of the criteria I'm going with, approachability, availability, and how representative each of their sounds and album is, let's start figuring out where to start. I want to start off by quickly suggesting an album that isn't in the main list, but I wanted to include it for huge noise and industrial fans that are watching this. If you are looking for the hard stuff right from the get-go and want a good taste of some of the noisier stuff from Esplendor, then I want to suggest the compilation Fungus Cerebi, selected tracks from cassettes from 1981 to 1989, put out in 2016 and available right on their Bandcamp page. These tracks have been compiled by Andres Norby, who has been editor and manager of the band since the beginning, and contains some amazing tracks and very noisy, hard-hitting rhythm grinding pieces and factory noise assault bombs. My personal favorite tracks are Bleno Boca and Lamada del Afropoder. And now for the actual list. I think it is apt to start off with an album that I think shows off some of the Esplendor's best within the rhythmic noise sound. Here is a description right from Discogs on what exactly rhythmic noise is to help you understand better. Rhythmic noise is a form of industrial music and a fusion of noise with various styles of electronic dance music. Rhythmic noise, aka power noise, should not be confused with power electronics, which is not influenced by electronic dance music and is closer to harsh noise. Its origins are predominantly European. I think the perfect album that fits this description has to be the group's third studio album, put out in 1988, Cosmos Kino. The album starts off with the intense buzzing track, Estación Katowice, and what sounds like a machine powering up, which is something you'll probably hear me say about many of their albums. They share this trait pretty heavily. And the machine is ready to take off or even might explode. Tracks like Adelante are pure power noise, and you feel the pounding in rhythm despite many of the tracks having an almost lo-fi quality to them, like the vocals on Adelante. I love this one comment in Discogs for the album. Power noise smiths from Spain give us another toolbox hydrogen bomb of sound and devastation. The song, Tribuna Robatia 1, is my absolute favorite off this album, and it's the perfect industrial track that, through the computer machine sounds, makes an almost perfectly dancing sound. The other tracks that are also called Tribuna Robatia all take rhythmic noise to different extremes of the spectrum between their speed or noise level. The beautiful Snow album cover is actually by Andreas this time, and this is an album created by the classic 80s duo of Arturo and Gabriel. This album is a must for the rhythmic noise fan, and I'll leave the discussion of Cosmo's keynote behind with one last quote from the Bandcamp page that says, "Though this is a live recording, the sound does not differ too much of their studio recordings. There's no claps or sign of human presence, and it could be considered as a stylistic bridge to Meccano Turbo LP." That is an excellent quote to end off with, since the next album I'm going to be suggesting is also the 1988 album masterpiece, that is Meccano Turbo. This is the fourth studio album, and we once again see the duo of Arturo and Gabriel, and this time they seem to be mixing it up and giving us a wide assortment of all kinds of different sounds. However, I mainly picked this album not just for its excellency, but because I feel Meccano Turbo is a perfect album to recommend for the old school industrial fans. This album definitely shows the influences of the sound at the time, from TG, SPK, and artists like Monty Casazza. Even some of Gabriel's newfound love and interest in the Middle East can be found on this album, with wonderfully unique tribal and calming tracks like Chic, which is definitely a unique track for the group, but fits well in the mixed old industrial style album, since many artists at the time were also experimenting with different sounds influenced by other cultures, which some might even call world music. The industrial shines through on some of the tracks, like the heavy-hitting opener, Vene Jugar, which features loud, mostly unedited gunshot samples, and a very dry and frantic Arturo screeching his vocals out loud. It's a very chaotic opener, and not quite the usually hypnotic repetitive rhythms we get, but it works so amazingly well and really rips you open for whatever else this album has in store. This album has all kinds of weird and wild tracks, like the track Who's That Senorita and Below, which also features some very unique Arturo vocals. Even though it is just him yelling below below over and over again, the track just feels so cacophonous and loud and desperate that it really pulls you in despite being almost very minimal in nature. The chaos feels really good to listen to. The title track alone, Meccano Turbo, is one of my favorites in their entire discography, and if you must hear at least one track from this album, it should definitely be this one. It's piercing and shocking and extremely fun, and the vocals really tie up the album in one perfect metal bow. There's also a whole episode dedicated to this album by the Noise Extra podcast, which is an amazing podcast that discusses all kinds of noise, power electronics, industrial, and dark ambient albums with special guests. This episode features guest Shane Inglis, or also known as just S. English, who has made many awesome heavy techno albums under labels such as Lies, which is a label I absolutely adore, so he definitely knows his good music, and I highly suggest this episode for far more in-depth and way better described and entertaining experience than I can give. I will link the episode down below, so please go on and support them. And I really feel that getting into Esplendor Geometrico, if you spent a day listening to Meccano Turbo specifically, and then checking out this podcast episode, I think this will really set you on the right path and excited to see more of them. If Arturo considers Esplendor meditation music, then which album is best suited for really showcasing tracks that are intensely mesmerizing and trance-inducing? Well, that would be our third album pick, and one I personally listen to very often to remain focused and calm while driving. That is the 1996 album, Balearic Rhythms. I believe that this is the 10th studio album, and a mostly Arturo mains album. His growing passion for more and more unrestricted and detailed sounds that are raw, tribalistic, and hypnotic can really be heard and felt here. Unlike some of the other works, where the average track length is about 5 minutes, many of the songs here go on for more than 7 minutes, even 8 minutes, or longer. However, with their sound, they feel so much longer and amazingly so. The opener, 30 kilometers de radio, feels like you are speeding down a highway while the radio is giving you a warning announcement. The intense looping rhythm and the clear sample work really well together and help mold the world you will enter with a crash landing within this album. Then you hit the second track, Tiempo Libre. This is where the album really starts feeling like a big meditation session. Just the perfect amount of looping drums and pleasant noise mechanical sounds, but just enough groove to keep you alert. The excellent Esplendor sampling abilities come in again in this album, and they are layered so seamlessly and melt so good into the tracks, especially the title track, Balearic Rhythms. The circular, pounding, crashing drum loops with the distorted radio talking sounds going on deep in the background work so amazingly well together, and again, make you feel like you're driving through some apocalyptic scenery and the radio just keeps cutting in and out, giving you warnings or maybe a small notion of hope somewhere on the horizon. And of course, I have to mention one of my absolute favorite Esplendor tracks of all time, which is Adaptación de Tyrannos, which has a beautiful and ominous chanting sample that echoes throughout the track. It's like a drum machine possessed by a tribal spirit, automatic percussion engineered to move the body instead of the mind. The rhythm is accented with white noise snares that crack against the ears like whips. A shaman from a time long past wails in the background. Unlike classical music, where a song moves to melody, this does not progress. It instead only changes by adding and removing additional layers and rhythms over the endless drums. This album is not on their Bandcamp, but it is very easy to find online. And this is one I have to suggest highly, because I knew right from the beginning of starting this project that this would absolutely be the album that I would have to showcase for their meditation abilities, because this has some of those most beautiful and hypnotic tracks within their whole discography, in my opinion. The next album I want to recommend to you shows us some of the best, pure, just like literal factory sounding industrial you can get. Probably some of the best within the entire genre, in my honest opinion. That is the 1997 album, Polyglophone, which has Arturo and longtime Esplendor collaborator, Saviero, on board. Even the cover with the amazing artwork of the highlighted hard hat clad worker helps show you exactly what this album is going to sound like and exactly the world that you're about to enter. Because it does in fact sound like this picture makes you anticipate. This could end up being a manufactured dreamscape or a mechanical nightmare. It's kind of a vision of both. The opening, Mas Luz, is immediately having the rev of machines starting up. The opening of the entire factory begins here. The pounding of the gears starting up and beginning to squeak and work together, some kind of glitchy computer operating. This is probably one of the best simulated sounds of machines starting up, next to actually recording real machines starting up. The second track, Jimenego, has some extreme buzzing power tool chaos going on, while some rare, very frantic Arturo vocals caught in it makes it sound like workers are trying to shout over each other and warn others about some emergency happening down in the factory, but are being drowned out by the voices of all the roaring engines, and danger might be imminent. Many of the tracks on here also feature this weird ringing sample deep in the mix, like a telephone is going insane or self-destructing up in some director's office while something crazy is going on the production floor below. The album stays very consistent with this factory setting and sounds throughout. The track, Mundial Radio, which is my favorite off the album, sounds like you fell right into a machine and are trying to escape while not meeting a grim demise by some esoteric gadget. The track is pulsating harshly and buzzing and sounds like the accelerating rhythm is never going to stop, even well after the track ends, that it's forever shaken up in your body, right in your circulatory system, deep into your spinal cord. The excerpt from the Bandcamp helps explain this album very well. This album carries out the potential expected from EG, mechanical industrial rhythms, both hypnotic and minimalist, patterns of percussion, a clear flavor of the Middle East, and the characteristic presence of recorded voices from various origins. Polyglophone is truly the album for you to check out if you're looking for that literal industrial interpretation of working in some highly tumultuous and noisy, dangerous factory. The final album I want to recommend to you all for Esplendor Geometrico is probably my most beloved, or at the very least, is in my top 3. This is the 2011 album Esplendor Geometricos, and I want to recommend it not only because it's just such an excellent album, but also I think this installment best shows off the more modern, clean, sterile, immaculate, yet completely brutalist and heavy style industrial that Esplendor is putting out right now. This work shows the absolute best from their switch to analog to the truly digital realm. I think the Bandcamp quote really sums it up so well. It says, "Repetitive and mechanic electronic rhythms are intermingled with recordings of voices, shouts, samples from traditional Oriental music, percussions. Some tracks induce a kind of trance, and you won't be able to stop listening to them over and over again." And that last statement is absolutely certainly true. This album also feels like a precursor to his collaborations with fellow noise sound artist Francisco Lopez, with their project Biomechanica that would also come out about a year later. Perhaps Arturo was already a bit influenced by Francisco by this point, since this album certainly has that immaculate sheen but powerful sound that hits you right in the face since there's no production blocking it, so it's just a noise wall that can crunch you up and throw you away, mind and soul, that his works are well known for. The word trance-like is very accurate here, as we start off with possibly the best Esplendor opener ever, and the track that I used for this intro, Puntos de Centrado, which once again has us starting up some kind of crazy esoteric machine, and the sound melting our brains and putting us in a hypnotic state with its rhythmic mechanical chugging. However, unlike Polyglyphone's factory, Deseralos feels more like an experimental laboratory, which is also reflected in the great album work with some giant laser machine towering over the one scientist trying to comprehend it, maybe possibly trying to control it without destroying himself or others. That's you. That's you trying to understand and meditate to the complex rhythms that blast through you while listening to this album. The track Presión is another highlight and is reminiscent of the opening track from Meccano Turbo, Ven a Jugar, with the same extremely panicked vocals. However, this time it's a sample of someone screaming for 911, all while a very catchy little beat plays on, and this presumably awful scenario is playing out in the background. Harbin is a really crazy track with some kind of weird distorted sample that sounds like someone is trying to make a bird call, while a turbulent and slick rhythm plays out that once again makes you feel like you're drag racing down some abandoned highway in some giant forest where you shouldn't be while you're getting hunted down. Kaka Zahara has a really cacophonous yet mesmerizing pewter sounding loop. It feels like you're being given a tour down deep in this evil scientific lab while a mad scientist is talking to you with the voice sample. I love this album, and I think this might actually be the absolute best one to start with in general for anyone, next to Meccano Turbo, although I think I am definitely biased since this is certainly one of my favorites. If you are looking to jump in Esplendor and you want more of that amazing digital noise industrial sound, and of course a more modern clean production sound, Esplendor Geometricos is the one you're going to want. We have finally come to the end of the list and the end of this video. I am so excited to have this finally created and out for all of you watching. Esplendor is definitely in my top 5 all-time best industrial acts ever, hands down. I really think they are truly one of the best, and somehow they just don't get enough credit or recognition as one of the best, the greats, or even one of the OGs. If you really are craving some super energetic and crazy experimental electronic music that really does make you feel like you are lost in some dark industrial factory fantasy, then you are absolutely going to want to listen to this band. I was really excited to work on this project and listen to so many great amazing albums, and a lot of them I had not even heard before, and I cannot think of one single bad album in their entire discography, and trust me, I've listened to pretty much all of it. It was such an exciting time to listen to everything and then listen to it again and again while trying to curate this list for you all. I never even felt burnt out for a second. It was also really enjoyable to read all the interviews Esplendor's put out, as well, of course, the documentary, and the Red Bull Music Academy interview. Arturo Lance is such an interesting and unique character, and I love this whole idea that Esplendor Geometrico is nothing more than his pure desire to create music for himself to just meditate to and relax to, and that he doesn't see any of this music as dark or brutal, but beautiful and repetitive and relaxing. I can honestly say I do agree after spending so much time with this incredible project. So, I don't have much more to say other than thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy your newest deep dive into the mechanical musical realm.